All right, Jerry, thanks for joining me on the show today for a record third time. Remind me and everybody who you are and what you do over at Operation Underground Railroad.
Well, thanks for having me, Andy. I can honestly say you are the only audience that's had me back 3 times. So it's really, no, it really is a privilege for me to be here, and I appreciate you thinking of our organization and trying to spread the word about what we do and this great cause. So my name is Jerry Gowen. I'm the CXO at Operation Underground Railroad. One of my responsibilities in that capacity is I oversee our aftercare efforts for all the survivors that we rescue, and we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But I've been here with Operation Underground Railroad for about 6 years now. Um, we are an organization that is dedicated to fighting child trafficking, particularly child sex trafficking, but also labor and other child exploitation, other forms of child exploitation. We are in 26 countries. We are in 28 states here in the United States. And really our approach for those of you that are new to what we do, it's really a twofold approach. We support law enforcement as they go out and try to rescue children who have been trafficked and exploited. And we do that by partnering with them, training them, providing them with resources. And then secondly, we vet and partner with aftercare facilities around the world who provide healing services for these precious survivors once they've been rescued.
That's great, and I appreciate you telling everybody what aftercare is because a lot of people think, you guys, go in and you make these rescues, but that's really just where your relationship starts with these victims, right?
Exactly right, Andy. Yeah, really, it's interesting. It's exactly, you're exactly right. It's the beginning of the journey, right? And it all happens in parallel. Our aftercare team goes in simultaneous and sometimes even ahead of the operations team to really make sure that we've vetted out those facilities that are best equipped to help the children once they've been rescued. Now, obviously, the first goal it would be to get them back with their families if at all possible, and that's goal number one. But what we're seeing, and we've seen this increasingly so over the past year or so, that just most of the time that's not possible, even though that the attempt is made to get them back with their family. They need somewhere else to go, and so we have to go in advance and really find those organizations that are on the ground, that are, like I said, best equipped to provide all the healing care for these survivors once they've been rescued. And that's the obvious, right? Food, clothing, shelter, medical supplies, but also obviously the therapy, the counseling, and like you said, Andy, that's just the beginning. Then they need help with education and vocational training, and that's the exciting part because and I've got a couple stories I can tell you later on, but that's where we're seeing the success because now they are able to learn skills and go and live a life of success and happiness.
And that's great. You want to be able to take these kids that have had such terrible things happen to them and set them up for success in life. That's awesome. You mentioned that human trafficking is this huge problem. It is here in the United States. It's in my state. It's in your state. If you're listening to this, it's in your state. So, kind of give us an overview about how bad this problem really is for us.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because it allows us to kind of frame the problem here and what's happening. So, to put it in modern day terms, you look at trafficking, this forced coercion, right? It really is modern day slavery. I mean, that's the way, Andy, we put it in, to terms that we can all understand. And they estimate that there's 40 million individuals in the world today that are enslaved. And you hear that number and you think, well, how could it possibly be so large? And it's verified by multiple organizations, and our own group has seen that right over the years as we've operated in these countries around the world. So you start with that, 40 million, and then 2 million of those are estimated to be children. And those are children that are being exploited, and the people ask me, well, why in the world is that happening? And it's because of so many other problems, right? It has a financial base. It is a estimated to be a trafficking is estimated to be a $32 billion enterprise, and it's very lucrative for these traffickers, and it's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And when you look at that size, that $32 billion, it's second only to drug trafficking. And I think the reason it's growing so quickly, Andy, is because these perpetrators can sell these victims over and over and over again. I mean, you take drugs, for example, it's once that is sold, it's done, right?
Right. Right.
But children, they will repeatedly sell these children over and over and over again. And you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that it's happening here domestically. I think sometimes people think, oh, it's happening in Thailand or Asia or
Right. Yeah.
third world countries, and that's not happening here. It's absolutely happening here in the United States. And just a couple of statistics there. I mean, the United States is the number one, the most common destination for victims. We're also the largest consumer of child pornography, and that's at the root, this problem. And we've talked about that before
Yeah.
with you. If you look at it this year, they estimate, well, in recent years, they estimate roughly around 17,500 people are trafficked into the United States each year. And look at the calamity this year with COVID
Right.
and the impact. And I often get asked, okay, well, how has that impacted this problem? Well, it's made it even worse. And here's why. More and more children, you talk about here in the United States, more of our kids, for your audience especially, our kids are online.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They're online more now than they ever have been before, because they're doing online schooling, and parents are still working, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they're looking at some of their data this year. They're showing 90% increase in the number of tips that they've received when you look at comparable rates just a year ago in 2019. And so our kids are online more, and they're more vulnerable there. And these perpetrators are going online to lure them into a place. They're looking for those that are most vulnerable, and that's what's happening. And so it's a real problem. It's facing us here in the United States, whatever state you're in. It's very real.
Yeah, and you talk about our kids being online, and that is absolutely true since COVID. And when you talk about they go online, and that's where they try to find children that are exploitable. They don't like pop up in the chat room of some website and say, "Hey, I'm a human trafficker. I'm going to do terrible things to you," right? That they don't show their cards. How is it that they're able to establish a relationship with their target?
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Andy. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, they're really looking for those that are most vulnerable, right? Um, they're looking for children that perhaps are in poor economic situations. They may have faced domestic violence, or they're runaways. Online, you're exactly right. They're not putting it out there, with bright lights, saying, "Hey, I'm a trafficker." They pretend to be one of the kids. They will get online and pretend that they are another teenager that just wants to, have an online experience with them, whether that's gaming or just social networking. And that's when they start to begin to ask for more information and more details. And these victims can be any age, any nationality, any race. You know, i- it's interesting. I think sometimes, Andy, we think of the movies, we think of Taken, and those situations are very real. And by the way, our organization finds those situations do happen. The
Mhm.
white van that pulls up and
Right, yeah.
and takes
So
the children away.
so
Uh,
an abduction off the street like that, that's not the most common way that kids are taken. It's what is it then?
Correct. You're exactly right. And that's not the most common way. And that does happen, right? There are cases. I mean, I think I may have mentioned before on a previous recording with you that, I had that happen to a neighbor. And
Right,
it's
yes.
exactly what you're talking about. She was online, met someone online who she thought was just a couple years older than her. Turned out to be, a 45-year-old man from New Mexico. And like you said, he was pretending to be someone else online, in that social networking reality that our kids are facing, right? But no, that's not the most common form. It actually, I'm glad we get a chance to talk about this. The exploitation actually more commonly occurs through someone that the child knows, right? It could
Mm,
be
okay.
a friend of the parent or a coworker of the parent or someone in the neighborhood, a family member, unfortunately, an extended family member. um, it that happens more commonly, and that's where, for this audience, I hope that we are having conversations with our children. It will help protect in both case scenarios that we talked about, both the white van, as well as the exploitation that occurs from another adult that is in their life. And that's where we need to have those conversations and really put into place those safeguards that'll help protect our children.
Right. A common question that people have, and one that, I have wondered myself very early on in my understanding of trafficking is, you know, when children are targeted and they meet the person that they thought was, just a few years older than them online, and they meet face to face, they realize, hey, this is not who I thought it was. Why don't they just run and scream? Or, maybe they do like kind of get suckered into something, but then why don't they try to escape? Why don't they try to get the police's attention? Why do they not try to get out of these situations? And I know some people do, but generally, right, victims get stuck.
Yeah. It's a That's a very common question that we receive. Why don't they just run away? Why aren't they able to do that? And that's because these perpetrators are experts in manipulation and in coercion, right? And they really will use information against them. Again, they find them through these various methods, whether that's social networks or friends or of family members, bars, the internet we've talked about. And really they lure them. There's this promise of love or protection or safety or security. And there's so many barriers there for the victims. I mean, if you think about it, there's shame. Obviously, many times the victims feel shame or guilt because they've even gotten into this situation. Oftentimes these perpetrators will use fear against the victims, right? The fear of retaliation against themselves or family members. There's threats that are made, and so they use that to ensure that compliance, to meet that demand. And really, unfortunately, there's so much misinformation out there, that many times these victims, they go unidentified, or they're misidentified, right? And but that's what it's all about, Andy, is how do these perpetrators use physical, emotional, psychological abuse, and that threat, right? So it seems like it would be easy for them to escape, but they really don't. They can't, because they're forced into that situation.
Yeah,
They feel
oh, sorry.
unhelpable.
Right. And it seems like, this is a repeatable process. You talked about, how much money this criminal enterprise brings in and how fast it's growing. Like, how do traffickers learn these type of tactics? I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm joking here, but like, is there a trafficking school that these bad guys go to learn this kind of stuff? How is it that this process can be done over and over again in so many different cultures?
You know, it's an interesting question to really think about. And if you look at their journey, we've looked into these cases and done, investigative work afterwards and gone back and more than often than not, we see a lot of the cases begin again with child pornography, and they start there, and that's horrible in and of itself, and then that becomes where that's not enough, and so that next step is to act that out and to go and physically find these kids, and it becomes a pattern, right? But where do they come from? Well, they're not they can be it can be an organized crime type scenario, and we deal a lot with that, particularly internationally, as we do work in a lot of these countries where these perpetrators start and they see how lucrative it can become, again, to repeatedly sell these victims over and over again, and so they continue to do it, and they become more skilled at again looking for the most vulnerable among us, and then it gets better. They essentially are teaching themselves, right, and those patterns become their reality. But Andy, we like we talked about, it's also it can be any person off the street, that
Hmm.
again, it could start with pornography and child pornography, and then it becomes a situation where they need to act on that, and these are the people that are obviously purchasing the
Right.
children, maybe not supplying them, but it could look like someone like me.
Hmm.
We just we don't know, and that's why it's again important to look for those signs. What are those signs um, that we need to be watching for, and teaching our children to look for. And there's great organizations. We have an online training program. If you go to ourrescue.org/training, it takes about an hour, and it's very high level.
Yeah, and I've done it, and it's great. And I recommend that everybody sit down and take that hour to learn what OUR wants to teach you.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's the first step, right? Is how do we educate ourselves? But you're right. There's not a school. It's unfortunately the behavior is learned, and then they become more and more experts in it, and again look for more opportunities to prey on the most vulnerable.
You spoke of dealing with organized crime in other countries. So it sounds like, I didn't know if this was like a gang problem. Is this a cartel problem? Or is it just, two or three people in a community can get together and say, hey, this is a quick way we can earn some money. So it's kind of, all three
All
situations.
all of the above, Andy. Yes,
Mm,
absolutely. And again, if you're looking at the buyers, that can be any profession. We have seen arrests made of people that are in positions of trust, or should be in positions of trust. Doctors, medical professionals, teachers. Um, that have been arrested because they have had the intent to go and purchase a child, right? And that's one of the things that we're working more and more with law enforcement, particularly here in the United States. I think people wonder, well, what are we doing here domestically? Law enforcement here is really trying to be more proactive and learn how to catch these perpetrators before they can offend these children, right? And so they can lure them in, and a lot of those operations have netted people in positions that you just wouldn't believe that would be someone that would be out purchasing a child. But you're right; it's all of the above. It is, it does come in more organized fashion, particularly in other countries. But yeah, it's happening across the board.
So, you get to be part of an organization that does amazing work. I know you have a lot of industry and trade secrets, but kind of give us an overview about how OUR finds children and rescues them.
Yeah, so when we first started, Andy, we had to go out, I think, looking for this a little bit more. It was there. Don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
sure. Yeah, I bet it was.
It was there, but we started with where we had some of our contacts with law enforcement and government officials, And as time has gone on, we've been in around for about 7 years now. We've learned more and more, and learned how to really get in there and help law enforcement in whatever capacity they find themselves. And so I will tell you now, they law enforcement and these countries are coming to us, because they've heard about what we've been able to do in the other countries and states here in the United States where we operate. And so they're coming to us and saying, hey, we know we have a problem, in our community. We may even know where the traffickers are. We may know we may know that they have victims, and that we need your help. Um, Internationally, they oftentimes need us to go in and literally play the role of the buyer. And that's where, if you go, to our website or YouTube channel, you'll see, some of those videos. We're very transparent because we have
Yeah,
to
you are.
record,
Yeah,
the evidence, right?
right.
Law enforcement needs that evidence to be able to put together a solid case. And so we will play the role of the buyers. And so it's fascinating. We would go in and we'll work with law enforcement, and we will pretend to to want to purchase a child. And we have to make sure that we're following all the laws in those countries, and obviously not even approaching entrapment or those types of scenarios. And we go in and we negotiate those deals. And law enforcement is on site, ready to come in and make the arrest once the arrangement has been made. And then the victims are freed, right? And that we talked about that already. But um as technology advances, obviously we're using more technology now to go in and go into these online, dark places where we can go in, and a lot of the selling is happening there as well. And so that's how we find these victims, is working hand in hand with law enforcement.
And that's fantastic because a lot of people, the last time we spoke, we talked about the whole Wayfair thing and about, how people thought that Wayfair was trafficking children through different priced items on their website. And people were, kind of thinking that that's how this whole process worked. But it seems like what you're telling me, it's very local, it's in your community, and it's not something that's, for the average person is going to be something that can be picked up on by the average mom and dad that's out there, which is why, the conversation that we're having right now is so important to be able to understand that it's not going to be this big flashing sign, that in the parking lot of this Burger King by this van, this is what's happening here. It's you just have to be able to see what's going on around you. And thankfully, you've got people like yourself out there who are trying to make sure that these kids are, taken care of and taken out of this horrible situation. So
Yeah. And there's a lot of organizations out there, Andy, that are trying to do exactly what you're talking about: educate and prevent. Obviously, our model is very unique. We're very hands-on, and I would tell you, I'm proud of us, because I'm proud of our operators and our aftercare team, because I think we provided a lot of education and awareness because of what we do and how we do it. And folks like you inviting us to come and share that. I think we've created a lot of awareness. But there are other groups out there that are amazing. Their sole purpose is just to create awareness and education, and really what signs to look for, and how to prepare and really protect your families, safeguard them from this. And Shared Hope's a great one, for your listeners. They do a lot of online training, and that's exactly what they're doing, is helping educate people. But yes, you're right. It is very local. It's in our communities, and it's a unique problem and unique challenge, and we're trying to come up with unique solutions for it.
right, I'm sure all the time you guys are sitting down at meetings, especially your operations guys, saying, here's this new thing that we're seeing, and I bet sometimes it feels like you're playing from behind because the criminal industry just keeps changing.
Yeah, and that's the trick, right? Is how do you that's the challenge. How do you stay ahead of these traffickers? You're right. As they advance, and you know what? I would view that as kind of a hopeful, you
Hmm.
know, piece to share here. If we're forcing them to change the way they go about this, that is success, and we'll continue to adapt and learn those trades so that we can stay on top of it. But you're right. You do feel like you're constantly having to adapt and be nimble, to evolve and combat the problem.
Right. So January 11th is a big day for Operation Underground Railroad and all the other groups that you were kind of mentioning just a minute ago. Tell us what's so important about that day.
Yeah, so thank you, Andy. January 11th is National Anti-Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and actually the entire month of January is focused on creating awareness for trafficking, I think it's particularly important that as we look for ways to prevent this, from happening, there are opportunities for all of us to go out and really learn more, right? But it's great that we have this dedicated day to helping us create awareness for this problem. And if you're okay, Andy, do you mind if I share just a recent experience about a couple of
Absolutely.
survivors?
Please do.
Uh,
Yes.
so just a few weeks ago, I got back from a country in Central America, and we were paying some visits to some of these survivors that we talked about, and two young women that I want to just quickly share with you about, and particularly as we're coming up to this important day in January. Um, Both of these young women were rescued by our operators on an operation that had happened a year or two previously, and here we were. We had a chance to visit with them. Totally individual cases and rescued in the same operation. And one of these young women um, decided that she wanted to go back to school, and she has two young children. She works the night shift, and so she has to take the bus into town, into the city each night. And when she gets back early in the morning, it's just in time for her kids to wake up, as you can imagine. And
Right.
she's tired, and she's got to take care of them. But she decided she wanted to pursue education, and she wanted to learn to become an accountant. And so we helped provide her with a laptop and a cell phone, and help with her books and schooling costs. And she is just doing so well now. Following that horrible time in her life, right? She's an amazing mother, and she needed some help with some medical costs, and so just to be there with her every step of that way through that journey, and just see her succeeding and learning to have a real career, to be successful and to provide for her family, given the horrible situation that she found herself in, just a short time before. The other young woman, different path, right? She wasn't as interested in going to school, but had more of that entrepreneurial spirit, and she had skills as a chef. She had learned to cook, previously, and but she didn't want to go back to school. She wanted to start a business, and that's what she did in this small community. We were able to help get her business up and running, and so she wakes up every morning, and she starts to cook for her clientele, which has grown significantly over the past 6 months or so. And she needed help. She was storing all of her food, several pretty far distance away from her house, because she didn't have a refrigerator. And so we helped her purchase a refrigerator and a stove to really be able to get that business up and running. And now it's grown to the point where she actually needs to relocate and find another place to be able to serve the demand that's coming from the
That's a
people.
good problem.
Oh, it's amazing, Andy, and it. I just wanted to share kind of those two stories of hope, after the rescue. And yeah, as January is the focus for January is to focus, on trafficking and awareness. There is hope out there. There's that rescue, but as you said from the very beginning, that's just the first piece. And but we are seeing these survivors that are thriving in their environments once they've had the help to get away and to start that healing journey.
That is outstanding. And I think I hear in all you're talking about with aftercare, you're showing these people that they still have value and that they are still a person and that their past doesn't define them.
Exactly right. And that's the hardest part, right? The past doesn't define them. They can have whatever experience they want to, just like you and I have in our lives. And they can have families, they can have professions, and you're right, they can start a new life. And though that's where the hope really starts, that's where the chain is broken, right? We talk about that
Right.
that chain, breaking the chain. That's where the chain is truly broken, is as these new lives begin.
That is outstanding. Jerry, I appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the show again. Let everybody know where they can find out more about you and Operation Underground Railroad.
Well, and I truly mean this, Andy. Thank you for having me on. It's again, it's very touching, and we're so grateful for outlets like yours, where you are trying to help educate people about this issue and this very important cause. So I'd encourage everyone, go to ourrescue.org. That's ourrescue.org. You can learn more there about the cause. We also have our partners listed there. Like I said, there's lots of great organizations that are out there. Um, Become aware, join the fight, as we like to say. There's a tab there where people can learn more about us, or they can volunteer, to support the cause with their time and talents. And there's something that everyone can do, and that's the message, right? For everyone, there's something that we can do, and even if that's just sharing about this. Someone that listened to the podcast today, go share with your neighbor, or your family member, your friend. Tell them that this is happening, and that there's something that they can do.
Absolutely. We got to get the word out there because we may not always get to be the professionals who go in and pretend to make a buy and rescue people, but we can sure raise awareness and help stop this problem from our end. Jerry, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today, buddy.
Great, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me. Thank you.